Curation in our spaces is occurring whether we are intentional about it or not. Meaning, just because we don't think we're curating doesn't mean that we're not. You look into the space that you have right now. That space is curated. The question is, what spiritual essence was there when that space was being created? In this video, Baba and I want to kind of touch on what curation is and how it has assisted in our family dynamic. I'm going to talk about the curation aspect, and then he's going to give a little bit more insight on how curation has helped him as a husband and as a father. This topic is very in-depth and layered, so we're going to condense it down. So let's give a simplified definition of what curating space is. It's the subconscious dialogue the woman of the home is having with all that enter her presence through the intentional organization of objects, relationships, symbols, and experiences. Mainly, what we want to stress is that ability to curate has been taken from the Black woman. The Black woman is in a space right now where she doesn't have the mental capacity to curate her spaces. Other entities are coming in and dictating how her home feels. It's a very staged space, meaning it took a lot of money and time and energy to decorate the home, but there's not a lot of substance within it. And that is also reflected in her relationships that come out of that home as well. And I think that's why we're seeing so much dysfunction within Black men and Black women and Black families, because the Black woman, if she's not able to curate through her essence and let that be her guide, she's really being inundated with all of these imagery, all of this consumerism. All of these things are blocking or hindering the Black woman from really being able to tap into that space. A lot of our Black women are stuck in their girlhood because they can't curate the spaces that are conducive to health, conducive to healthy relationships, healthy children. All of these things are really important. Another thing that curating space does for our homes, for our relationships, is that it protects it against infidelity. For men, they psychologically cannot leave a space that was curated for them, right? Like they're spiritually, we're not even talking about a conscious level, we're talking about subconsciously and spiritually. Men cannot reject spaces that were specifically curated with them in mind. That is one way that we keep our men with us and not looking outside the home, not having side girls or not having mistresses. All of that comes from a space where the man doesn't feel that the space was curated with him in mind, meaning there was other entities or other inspirations outside of the woman that he married that promoted these things that are in the home, or this aura that's in the home. Because really curation is an aura. It's not really so much what you see. That's an aspect of it, but it's really the presence. Us as Black women, we have a lot of issues with fidelity in our relationships because our spaces aren't curated for our men. And it's so easy for a side woman to come in and just mimic what you've curated because you bought it from IKEA. It's not curated for him, meaning you didn't look into him spiritually. You didn't look into his essence and say, what is it about this man that I can create a space for him specifically so that his gifts, his desires, his mental state elevates by entering my presence. And this doesn't just happen in the home. Just him being in your presence should do this as well. But because we as Black women, we're lacking in having true essence and a true presence, our men, it's so easy for them to just find another person because she don't have it neither. The side girl don't got it and the wife don't got it. Neither one of them have the ability to curate, so it's very easy to just be like, well, I'm going to do this today and I'll do this tomorrow. But if the woman has curated a space specifically for him in mind, specifically for the children in mind, spiritually, even if he wanted to leave the home, he couldn't, because his spirit would be like, but here is where I belong. That's something that we have to ask ourselves. How did we attract somebody who would, betray our trust in that way? And that goes back to the clairvoyance. That goes back to the discernment that we as Black women aren't really operating in. We don't have to worry about people backstabbing us. Right. We don't have to worry about people, doing us wrong and hurting us and lying to us, because we haven't curated a space for that. Right. We've only curated a space for honesty, for functionality, for mental elevation, for deep conversations. That's what we've curated the space for. So I think that is really important. What do you have to say about fidelity in that space?
I think it's very important that we draw a distinction between comfort and meaning. Because a lot of times when we're talking about curating space, it could easily slide into that stage space. Because remember, the stage space is very comfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, you can be leisurely, you can relax, but at the same time, you're not being challenged. You're not being provoked to think on a higher level. So comfort, while important, is not the defining feature of a curated space. Remember, the curated space is a product of thought, deep intellectual and spiritual thought on the part of the woman. So that means in the curated space, she's speaking to the meaning and the purpose that the man is trying to achieve in life, not his comforts. Because a man cave can give you comfort. But again, the man cave isn't going to nurture fidelity in the relationship.
Right.
What nurtures fidelity is, that, again, that spiritual home base. And when you have a spiritual home base, again, infidelity is an impossibility. Because as I say, while your body is not who you are, your spirit is. Yes. So you have to obey your spirit, but you can disobey your body.
Absolutely.
But you cannot disobey your spirit.
Right.
So the way you create that anchorage of the man within the home is you have to create spaces that are not only comfort him, but you have to create spaces that speak to his meaning and purpose in life.
Right.
So that he sees his future. He doesn't just say, oh, in the present I feel well, but I feel well now and I'm going to feel well in the future because my woman, she's mapped out a space for me that is fulfilling all of the needs that I have on a psychological level. Right. Meaning that need for stability, that need for peace, that need for purpose, that need for creativity. All of that is handled within the curated space.
Within the curated space, right. It's really communicating with the man subconsciously. Yeah. And we do it with our children too. Yeah. We set our children's rooms up so that we can subconsciously, have an imprint there as well. It's happening on so many levels. Yes. But I think the first level is with the husband, because it's supposed to go husband, then you curate space for your children afterwards. So we have to make sure we're doing things in order, right? We got to make sure that we've mastered how to curate space for our husbands first. Then we can move on to curating space for our children.
Once the wife curates the space for the husband and he derives all of this benefit, all of this value from that curated space, he'll see the value of protecting that space because this is where I get my sustenance. This is where I get my regeneration. So anywhere where someone gets things of value, they will instinctively protect that space. So we have to understand, when we're talking about curating space, we aren't talking about an imbalanced dynamic. We're talking about, this is the traditional African model of complementarity, where you have different roles but equal investment. Again, while the woman creates the space, the man protects the space.
Curation in our spaces is occurring whether we are intentional about it or not. Meaning, just because we don't think we're curating doesn't mean that we're not. So this means that our spaces, if you look into the space that you have right now, that space is curated. The question is, what substance, what spiritual essence was there when that space was being created? And that is the problem that we're facing in our relationships, is the spaces that we're creating are always going to be curated because that's just natural to the woman. The problem is, these are manufactured, these are staged spaces, and it's reflecting in our relationships, and it's reflecting in our children, and it's reflecting in the dysfunction that we have outside of the home. Also, curating starts with your attire, with the way you present yourself. That's a form of curation too. And that is also how you invite those people in to decide if they're going to be in your space or not. We can also create space where abuse can't happen. We have that power. But if we're not intentional about the spaces we're curating, we are curating spaces where abuse, infidelity, mistrust, disobedience, like all of addiction and like all of these things are happening. Our ability to be able to curate healthy spaces is also going to be conducive to us being in those spaces. Meaning we have to be at home to curate the space. We can't be at work all day and date night, right? We got to be in the home to curate the space. And that was, I feel like, the fall of when Black women stopped being able to curate the way we used to be able to, was when we started fighting to be in corporate America. Started fighting to compete with the man's income, and now we not in the home to curate it, and then we wonder why he leave outside the home, or we wonder why our children are dysfunctional. It's all of these things. The woman needs to be in the home. That's what homemaking is. Homemaking and curating are the same thing. We need to be in the home in order to make sure that we are curating it for a environment that is conducive to our health. So I want to jump now into asking Baba, how has being in a curated space changed you as a husband, as a father? Like, what does that look like?
So I think drawing a distinction between curated spaces and non-curated spaces, or as my wife says, stage spaces, is curated spaces are constructed based on the thoughts of the curator. Whereas stage spaces, these are usually a product of money, spending, consumerism. You want things to look aesthetically pleasing. But when you curate a space, you're saying the aesthetic isn't everything. You're also aiming for functionality. So in the curated spaces, as a husband and as a father, I find that I've been able to become a better protector. I've been able to become a better teacher. And that's because I think one of the real benefits of a curated space is it organizes the environment so that when I look into it, I know where everything is. I'm not cluttered. I'm not overwhelmed. I don't feel like my energy is divided, but I can invest 100% of my energy in what matters to me most.
Right.
And I think this is one of the real assets of the curated spaces. I think it creates what's called an integrated home, meaning you don't have man caves, you don't have spaces where people can separate themselves from the family and then develop these psychological dysfunctions that don't really feed the balance within the home. These are all benefits, I think, of having a curated space.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about too, like, what are some things that I've done in the home specifically that have created that space to where you are able to feel your power?
Yeah, so it's plenty of things. I mean, one obvious one is we don't have a television. I think not having a television in the home is extremely important because TVs, what they do is they monopolize the energy of the home.
Yes.
If you have a TV in the living room, all of the energy is converging around that TV. And for the most part, especially if you live in the West, what's coming out of that TV is propaganda, it's lies, it's instilling low self-esteem in our children, it's corrupting our children. So we have to cleanse and purge our spaces of televisions because the television is an agent of the culture of our enemies. And then in the place of those televisions, we have to begin putting art, we have to begin putting symbolism, we have to be putting all the paraphernalia of our culture, because when you put things that reflect the best of your culture, you become the best person you can become. You become the best mother, the best father, the best brother, the best sister. All this is a byproduct of being intentional about how you curate space and making sure that space is overfull with things that reflect the best of your people. I think a lot of the complementarity that we have within our home is a product of the fact that we're very conscious about putting things in the space that will educate us and seek, force us to seek and dig deeper about who we are and what our potential is as human beings. Going back to the clairvoyance, that's what clairvoyance is. You see the potential in your mate. You see the potential in a space that you occupy, to remake it and enhance it and add value to it. I think curation, it underscores just how pivotal the presence of the Black woman is. And she's constantly having this subconscious dialogue with her mate and with her man. And through this dialogue, what you're doing is you're unlocking doors for new things to enter your life. So I think part of the curation is we have to develop a culture where we honor and venerate motherhood, we honor and venerate wifehood, and specifically how motherhood and wifehood is a complementary path to husbandhood and fatherhood. So that's the piece of insight that I would offer from the perspective of a husband, of a wife that has developed her curating skills.
Right. And I'm still in the space where I am still learning and still observing on how to be the best curator I can be. It's something that we as Black women aren't taught as young girls. So everything that I've learned has really just been from studying and research and talking many hours with my husband. I just really want to encourage the same thing for our sisters. And if you don't have a husband yet, and if you're not a mother yet, you still have the opportunity to, work on that skill and understand that you need the skill, and seek sisters who have the ability to curate and who are curating for spaces for their families to be healthy and whole and complete.